Roby Price, and welcome to my workshop.
Well, I'm just back from Knoxville. Got a load of lumber in the back, a couple of sheets of plywood. We're building drawers again, and I know it's getting repetitive, but this time we'll do them blind. Come on inside. Let me show you what I'm talking about.
Kitchen stuff. New drawers for an old box.
Well, we're out of the truck. I got my lumber here and I've got my plywood behind you over there. We are going to be making more drawers, but this time we're going to be making them blind. Blind dovetails. That's a little bit of a difference. Maybe not a lot, but a little bit. And these drawers are going to be considerably wider. They're going to span 36 inches. So we've got to put more bottom support in these than we have typically. Now, we don't have drawer faces on these because they go into lower cabinets. And the lower cabinets already have doors. So at the end of the day, the fronts have to look just right, hence the blind dovetails. So we've got our lumber right here. First step in the process is we need to mill it up. So let's get busy on that. Well, if you're gonna mill up rough cut stock, you gotta have a jointer. It's probably the most important tool in my shop. But let's consider, before we get started milling up, what we're trying to do. I have 36-inch wide cabinets, 2 of them that we're making interior drawers for. I have one that's 24. We only need boards that are 36 and 24 wide to get the sides, the front and backs of these drawers. And the cabinets are 24 inches deep. That's standard. Our drawer slides are 21. 24 inches will be fine. And those board lengths are much easier to manage and the material loss is going to be significantly less. So before we get started over here, let's go to the compound miter saw and get ourselves some board lengths that are more manageable. I'm set up over here at my cross-cut station. I have a stop at 24 inches. We need 16 boards at 24 and we need 8 at 36. Theoretically, I could get 3 lengths out of this board with 2 36s and 1 24. It doesn't always work out that way. Sometimes you've got knots and imperfections in this stock, but I know that if I cut a 24 out of here, I can get 2 36s out of the rest of it, and that's where we evaluate our material. If I've got a knot in the board, maybe I only get 2 more 24s out of that, but at least I get the most out of my material. It's all about evaluating your stock. Well, I've got 16 2-foot boards here with an extra, and I've got 8 3-foot boards over here, again, with an extra. I learned my lesson from the last job. This is the waste. Now, I've got some checking right here that's pretty severe, and I've got a few boards with knots in them where I don't want them. That's all part of the process when you deal with rough cut. You get the good price, but you do have more waste. Now, a lot of this could be used for other projects. And we will save it until we no longer have room, and then it may go into the fire pit. But for now, let's start working with these boards. It's time to get some straight edges.
The first step in the milling process is getting a straight edge. Notice I said straight, not square. We won't get a square edge until we face plane this board, but for right now, a straight edge will do.
We've got 2 drawers per each cabinet, a bottom and an upper. That's inside the lowers when they open. Now, generally, the bottom drawers are deeper than the top drawers. I want 5 inches on the bottom and 4 inches on the top. I think that will be aesthetically pleasing, and that's why the drawers are spaced the way they are. Now, I have jointed this edge right here, and I jointed the edge on purpose because if I had any defects, they were up here. We will rip half the drawers to 5.5 inches. As I said, I wanted 5, I want a little extra until we finally get to a point where we're actually putting in dovetails. Then, once I'm happy with the boards at 5.5, we'll rip the remainder at 4.5.
With 2 edges parallel, it's time to face plane, and we'll do that on the jointer. We'll follow up with getting 2 square edges on each side, and yes, they're square, because we do have a flat surface to index from.
I've got one side flat. It's time to parallel it up on the planer. Now, when you do half blinds, the front panel is 3/4 of an inch. So we will take it just proud of 3/4 of an inch. We'll take all of them that height. And then we'll let it sit. We'll let it acclimate. We've taken off a good bit off the bottom here. We're going to be taking off a good bit off the top. In order to keep it from warping so much, we're going to try to let it sit and acclimate. So let's get this stuff planed out and then we'll sticker it up. These boards have had a little time to acclimate and they're looking good, but the faces are a 1/16 strong and the backs and sides are a 32nd. So let's take these over to the jointer, reinforce that flat face, and then get them to final thickness at the planer. I'm marking with a pencil and not a crayon this time because I don't want a heavy mark. It's just barely there. Now we're only doing the faces. This is another thing. That'll tell you when you're bowed up. So if you'll do that like this, you'll be in good shape now. I'm taking off the absolute least amount possible. I want to sneak up on this.
I could play the full clip, but I won't. It took about 6 passes to get a totally flat surface. And that is because we set the jointer to the minimum setting. I wanted to preserve as much material as possible. And to do that, well, that's the minimum setting. Takes more time, but your boards are thicker.
We are flat and parallel on the faces. It's time to start to look at the edges. First thing I want to do is get a square edge on the bottom.
If your fence isn't square, it's doubtful your board will be. This is a trick to mark your boards for taking light passes. Mark both corners. If you're really out of square, you'll hear it take off the material, but it may not be taking off both sides. And remember, mark both sides, you need to know where you've been.
We need a dado for the drawer bottom, and we're using 1/4 inch plywood. Now I've made a couple of sample cuts, and I've got a pretty good fit right here. This is my initiation blade on one side and the smallest of my dado infill blades on the other. And I find that gets me pretty close to this 1/4 inch plywood that's not 1/4 of an inch. Now, we have marked our boards top and bottom, then jointed this side. So I know that this is the top. That helps me orient the board correctly in the table saw.
Let me set the stage here. This is typically a throwaway clip. I just wanted to show the fact that I was cutting a dado. And then something very interesting happened. Did you see the table saw jump? Well, that wasn't my heart skipping a beat. The brake to the saw stop engaged. One really has to wonder why. There is nothing there to touch the blade. That wood is kiln dried and it has been stickered and sitting on the shelf for about a week.
Saw stop. Yeah, I had a brake that activated without cause.
The infill blade is missing a carbide tooth and the metal is actually bent. The edge blade fared a little better, but I don't trust it. Of course, the brake is gone, and I have sent it to SawStop. They're supposed to run a diagnostic and tell me what happened, but I have yet to hear back from them. Between the new cartridge and a new dado stack, I'm looking at about $300 here. Don't be surprised if you see this video again in a different format.
Well, I'm set back up here at the table saw with my standard blade, and I'm making my cuts. And as you can see, this is where the dado blade stopped. Now I have my next cut right here, and this is the easy one. It's at 1/2 inch. I measured that carefully, and the rip fence gets me there. After we make all of these, I have to move the fence appropriate amount so that it fits the plywood, and then we'll make the second cut. It's twice as many cuts, and it's a lot more trouble, but it's the only alternative we have right now. Well, behind the scenes, I've been doing some adjustments to my dovetailing machine, and we'll talk about that more in a moment. But one of the reasons that I've been doing it before I actually cut dovetails, you'll understand, I need to get these drawer heights cut to a specific width. The first thing that we need to do to achieve that is we need to get this dovetail spacing such that it hides the dado for the drawer bottom. Now that dado, it continues on this way and on that way, but you can kind of see this black mark right there. That's the corner where that dado is going to be. If you turn it around the front, that dado is hidden right on up to this point by the dovetail, and it goes this way on the back of that side of the drawer. Now, this whole dovetail right there hides it completely. So I can put that dado in there and you'll never see it. So I can go make straight passes, what I've been doing, making straight passes through the table saw with these dados instead of a stopped dado. Stopped dado works fine, it's a pain in the neck. You can't do it on a table saw, you gotta go to a router. But this way, we can make it work and it's entirely hidden right here. So, getting this spacing on the bottom where this is spaced correctly and this is spaced correctly in the jig is important. Now, these dovetails are spaced at 1 inch. And when we put them back in the jig, this side is cut with the bottom against the stop. When I turn it over, this side is cut with the bottom against the stop. So we have to have these spaced evenly. These dovetails are at 1 inch. That's according to the machine. So what we will do, this spacing right here is 4 1/4, and that's the reason for going through all this trouble. And at 1 inch, we're gonna make the upper drawers at 3 1/4. So we're gonna go ahead and cut them all to width now. Well, my width is good and my height is good on all the boards. You might think we're ready to cut some dovetails, but we're not. I have just come back from my client's place and I have done the final measurements on the cabinets. I know the inside dimensions, so I should know how wide I can make the drawers, but I don't. And I'm going to show you why, because I thought about the installation process from putting the drawers on the slides, and I've worked it backwards, and that's what we have to do. So come on over to the workbench, let me show you what I've got going on there. Well, this looks like a load of scrap, and it is. This is scrap from a previous project, but it represents something very important. This distance, this 34.5 inches, is the inside dimension to my client's cabinets. And I'm going to use this to install my Rev-A-Shelf pilaster system and the drawer slides. Now, that is to give me the definitive width of these drawers, and once I get the drawer slides installed, I'll go ahead and calculate the length that they need to be. That'll allow me to get to final dimension on my drawer stock. The other thing I want to do is I want to be able to put a template on these walls that will allow me to pre-drill for these, so that when I go to the job site, I can quickly crawl into that cabinet, drill out the holes, and install this system quickly.
With my pilasters in place, I'll go ahead and drill out the holes with a Vicks bit. But wait, there's something not quite right here.
I've got my jig, and I've got a top, front, and bottom 4 holes that help me install the pilasters. This is a good jig, and I'm looking forward to using it. But it took a few iterations to get there, and there's good reason. Out of the box, I had the pilasters, and the flange installed this way was reversed on this side. In other words, I had the short leg out instead of the long leg, which meant that these were spaced incorrectly in this direction. Second, when I turned them around, the spacing in this direction changed. So I had to do multiple iterations on my jig to get everything right. In addition, I wanted to come out a little farther, at least past the edge where the frame would be. I have a cleat right here and one on the other side. That's important because when I go to the site, I will take the jig and index it against the frame. And that'll make sure that I'm consistent on both sides. So all these things have gone into a lot of effort to get this simulation put together, but it has taught me a number of things. First and primary, make sure I've got all my flanges right, and that is a big deal. Second, make sure you've got enough material out everywhere and the correct spacing. All this prep is going to help us make the drawers fit perfectly. Additionally, it's going to help us install our pilasters correctly.
Now that I'm better organized, let me show you the installation sequence. Our jig is indexed against the front face frame, and we'll go ahead and take our drill and just touch. I just want to mark where the holes are. We'll drill the actual holes with a flagged bit. Remember, the actual panels are only 1/4 inch thick, and we don't want to go through. Now that all the pilasters are configured correctly, we'll go ahead and install those. The Rev-A-Shelf system comes with buttons that are to be installed on the undermount drawer slides. These buttons are ingenious. When the spacing is correct, you slide it into the back pilaster and then it hooks into the front, and it is strong and stable.
This is one of my front faces, and I have cut that to length, and previous to this I had it assembled and laid it into the slides, and it does pretty well. Now, one of the things that I want to point out is these can adjust this way, and I've got a jig right here that I can put right in between, just like this. I'll loosen the screws up, tighten it in. Once it's tight, I'll pull it out. That helps me move this in a little bit to get a fine-tuned fit with this particular drawer. Now that we have this cut to length, we're going to cut all the drawer faces to length, and then we can do the dovetails. I do not want to cut these to length until after I have a complete set of dovetails. That way, if I screw up one of the dovetails, we can do it again.
With my mock-up assembled, I know exactly how wide my drawers need to be to fit in the undermount drawer slides. I think it's time to cut some dovetails.
Well, all the dovetails for the drawers that go into 3-foot wide cabinets are done, and I have assembled one of them right here. I've also taken the time to put the bottom on. I've put the clips in place, and we are attached to these drawer slides just like it will be in the cabinet. Now, why go to all this trouble? Well, now I know exactly where this hook falls with respect to these side panels. And what that will do is it'll give me the dimensions on where to put the dado. This is the back for a 2-foot cabinet drawer. Where to put the dado and how far to extend the drawer bottom out. So we can make all these cuts at the table saw at this point. Let's disassemble this and get started on just that. I've got my side panel right here and my marks are clearly evident. I have put a piece of plywood here and screwed it onto my crosscut sled. I've also put a stop over here, and I placed that stop after putting this in place and lining it up with this edge. Now, after I put these screws in place, I cut that edge. And of course, this is what was left over, that stop over there. I know exactly where this is. So when I make this cut, I know I'm in good shape. So at this point, I would just say there are about 6 to 7 other ways to do this. This is just the way I started out and the way I envisioned it happening.
Well, I made an attempt at trying to cut out a dado with multiple passes on a straight blade. It just doesn't work. So without a dado stack or a dado break, we'll go to the router table to clean this up. I will also take the time to sand the insides of these drawers. It's a real pain to do it after they're assembled. The drawer bottoms get a reinforcing strut, and that is mortised in the front, and it is screwed into the back. The mortise is done with a shaper origin.
We've got our pieces sanded down, and it's time for a little assembly. I have taken the time, although off camera, to cut my drawer supports to length, and those are in good shape as well. So all my parts are here, and I've taken the time to get my clamping mechanism both attached to my workbench and square. All these things are lined up to where these 2 runs are parallel, and these 2 end stops right here are at a 90-degree angle. So I'm feeling pretty comfortable. We won't be using this for long, but we will be using it to get that initial glue set. So with that, I'm going to put the camera in a higher position, a little closer, and we're just going to run through the steps.
The dovetails need to be glued, and that's understood. Make sure that you get all sides. I only apply glue to the pins. I'm really trying hard to keep it out of the inside corners. That is very difficult to clean up after the fact. We'll go ahead and assemble on the edge of the table such that there is a bit of overhang, and a little persuasion is needed. The drawer bottoms are next, and they can be a little finicky, but once you get toward the bottom, it all seems to assemble up okay. Now these are very large or very wide drawers, so a little bit of finesse is needed to get the drawer to seat into the front panel. A little bit of glue in our dados, and it's time to install the drawer backs. Now that the drawer back is seated correctly in the dado, we'll secure it with some 1-inch brads. The drawer bottom supports are attached with screws and glue, but we need to know where to put the glue line, so we'll go ahead and use those supports Put them in the correct place and make a mark. That's where the glue goes. The front of the support has a tenon, and we'll push that into the mortise and then drop it right on that glue bead. A screw in the back secures the support, and we'll start with a countersink and follow with a standard bit. My combination square is set at 1/4 of an inch. We want to hit that 1/2 inch drawer back. There are 2 screws in the middle of that support, and those screws are really there just to hold those supports tight against the drawer bottom. The glue will do the work later. We do drill the holes from the back side through the drawer. It is easier to get the hole in the right place if you're coming from the bottom of that support. We get 3 more screws in the back of the drawer. This is a big drawer and we need the support. After we check for square, we'll put it aside and let it cook. After a little dry time, we'll round over those edges with an 1/8 inch radius bit.
Having finished rounding over the edges, I want to take off the mill marks, and to do that, I use my sander. Now, I have a pad on here. It's about 3/8 inch thick, and it's soft. So what happens is when I press down, I get just a little creep over on each side, and that keeps me from having a hard edge after I've rounded over these edges. And I can move it around pretty good, and it works great. It's cheap, it's easy, and it gives your sander a new dimension. Well, the woodworking is done. Everything is complete. My half-blind dovetails are all done nice and tight. They look really good. I am sanded down to 220 inside and out. I have even taken the time to install the front connections to my undermount drawer slides, just to make sure all the holes are drilled in place, pre-drilled, so when it's time to install, I can do so. These drawers have all been tested out in my mock-up of a cabinet. Everything fits, so I think I'm in good shape for installation, except the finish. The finish is not in place yet, and there is a reason. I have ordered 5 gallons of pre-cat lacquer with the catalyst separate. And the reason for that is, we're getting back into the study. All those drawers and cabinet boxes need a coat of finish as well. And we're gonna be doing all this at the same time. So the lacquer's on back order. I've got a couple of days. At least I get to clean up my shop. But next episode, we'll bring these back out again and put a coat of finish on them. So if you've liked what you've seen, give me a like and please subscribe. And I hope to see you next time in Roby's workshop.